Hey everyone, this is Andrea. She did the last show at Goldsmiths Gallery. It was called Franks Last Walk. We're gonna do a walking interview here on the Greenway in East London, and I'm gonna ask her some questions about her show. Your work in Goldsmiths Gallery depicts a fictional character who dies in the scene that you kind of reenacted. Do you see it? Do you see it as a reenacted scene?
No, I see it as an extended scene that never happened. So it's like a post-log to the show.
Uh-huh.
It's
Because because it because it has like a different ending, you think, than
well, I guess it's an imagined scene because it never actually took place on the show, but it took place in between the lines, like in between the narrative. He did die, and then it just cuts to his wife in a different city. So there's never the mourning process never happens.
yeah.
But for me, I felt like I wanted to explore mourning this character.
Do you feel like the people that should visit the gallery can have the space to actually go into this mourning at the space itself? Because you placed like a pillow there, and there was
Yeah.
like it was kind of like an altar, right? Or like a
Yeah.
you were talking about the shrine. Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea came from having it on Remembrance Day, which for me is where I come from in Canada. It's kind of an important day to just remember everyone who's died, especially all the soldiers. So I was thinking that maybe other people would want to take this space to think of who they know that they've lost.
And was the because in the scene it's like Frank who is dying, and it's his last. It's called the last walk.
Yeah.
Right? And so do you think Frank is like a kind of embodiment for all the people that have ever died in a way?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I liked about the show is that it's very strong in character development. So Frank had his own life, and I feel like he was also given his own death and his own way of dying. So the director really crafted kind of a way that to show his death that would reflect on the way he lived. So for instance, he could have settled with everything and gone off to marry or to be with his wife with kind of everything, but he needed to get revenge on these bad guys.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that did him in, and that was his ending. That was his downfall.
Yeah.
So I guess it is a very particular death. I don't think I was thinking of it in any general sense.
Yeah.
But this particular character, I think, which is kind of difficult because I guess that makes it a limited audience and a limited reception. But at the same time, I guess there are universal things to dying and to death and to mourning that hopefully people could access with the work.
One of the things you told me is that you didn't want to actually go to the cemetery because you thought it would maybe awake some of the spirits that might be here.
Yeah.
How do you feel now being here?
Well, I think that it's just something we don't know about the afterlife. So I
Yeah.
think that we should be respectful in any way we know how to, and
In daily life as well, I guess.
yeah, in daily life. And yeah, that's part of the taking care of the death that we kind of don't look at, I guess, in our culture. So
It's interesting. I heard that on the other day on the radio. I heard that in the beginning of this century, or like in the 60s, not even 30% of the people were ever chose to get burned. What's that called?
cremated.
Cremated. But these days, actually, a lot, like more than 60% of the people choose. So it's like more than half of the people choose to be cremated.
That's really interesting.
And they have like a totally different afterlife in that sense. That like you don't have this place anymore. This where you can actually visit. You have the person at home, and it's much more like a roommate, maybe like a flatmate. If there's such a thing as the spirits, and if they maintain close to the body, then yeah, it's a different situation. Maybe in the future there will be no cemeteries anymore.
I think it's a big indication of the immateriality of our culture, that we don't really believe in the importance of objects.
And you were talking about, because it's the moment that so his wife, actually, which is a hallucination of him, the moment that she says, "But you're already dead," is the moment that he actually dies, right? Because he's already like kind of crawling out of, like, as a spirit outside of his body. And that's the moment when he's died. So that made me, like, in one of the things that you wrote about yourself, you're saying that you're like talking a bit about imagining a reality, or so-called reality. So I was wondering, like, the spirits in the TV series, but also in so-called real life. Like, in what way do you find that reality? Do you feel like you're defining reality in that sense, or like do you feel like it has to be defined as a thing, or can it be a fluent entity in that way? Like the way that you, like, do you either believe in spirits or not is maybe like an irrelevant.
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit irrelevant. It's maybe more of a speculative idea, and just kind of thinking about how we think of the dead and what stories we tell ourselves. Because my interpretation of this whole scene was really informed by another fan who wrote about it, and who wrote about why his spirit goes on, and then why he finally is able to die when his wife tells him that you're dead and you can move on.
Yeah.
So it's very speculative, but I'm just interested in, as a culture, and how it's represented in TV. Because I think death and the afterlife are not very commonly even represented in. And it's been said that our culture we don't die well. Like, we think about living, but we don't really prepare for death, and then we don't.
It's a thing that we don't usually speak often about.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that we did a collaboration once, and we wanted to put the hashtag death into a show, and we had to, like, really think. Yeah, it's something that is still in our culture somehow. Something, One other thing that you've been thinking about a lot lately is the thing junk space.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit more about, like, is it a term that you made up, or is it a fixed term, or where does it come from? How do you use it?
It comes from an essay by Rem Koolhaas, who is an architect, and he's kind of talking about, like, the death of architecture. So after inventions like air conditioning and elevators, we don't need to kind of house space in the same way. It can just be kind of extended space, like big shopping malls that are kind of regulated by these, I guess, more mass technologies.
So you walk in, it's almost like Snake, right? Like, where it goes into the right side and comes out to the left immediately, or something like that. You know the computer game Snake, or like what is on the phone, on the very old Nokias?
Oh, yeah.
So it goes into the right tunnel and comes out of the left tunnel.
Yeah. It's like a continuous, endless space.
Yeah.
So but he writes in this essay very poetically about that space and what that means for all of culture, and how it's kind of come out of commodity culture, and just this kind of, like, lack of attention to the environment around us, and kind of like cheap ways of doing things. So I extend that phraseology to, like, the media and kind of trash culture, and I align them together. Junk space, and then junk space becomes like a mental space of all the kind of junk that gets put into your head from the media and from advertisements. So for me, junk space is a mental space as much as a physical space.
Yeah. Is the fictional character and the obsession with the fictional character also, in a way, an extension of this similar kind of junk space, or
Yeah.
like, how are they related?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it started happening that I was watching TV shows before going to bed, just kind of to like zone out and pack away the day and like escape a little bit. But then it ended up that these TV characters were infiltrating my subconscious. So I was kind of thinking about that as like junk space becoming very personal. But I think fan culture in a way is a really good technique for appropriating this junk and making it less junky, because you make it more meaningful to you personally by kind of creating your own fictions to do with it, or internalizing it in a way that makes sense to you. So I think there is this kind of idea of top-down influence from the media onto you, but you can also influence the media by the way you consume things and how you kind of filter it into yourself and the stories you tell about it, I think. Yeah.
There was another thing in a small text that you wrote recently, and you were calling yourself a mixologist. And I'm not sure if that's like something completely else, but I was just curious, like what did you mean about that? What did you mean with that?
I don't know. I think
Because I really like the word. Like it's something a little bit more magical than mixed media artist or something.
Oh yeah.
Because were you thinking about that, or were you thinking about something else when you wrote it?
I can't remember, but it does come from the cocktail mixer. Like someone who makes cocktails is a mixologist.
Okay, so it is an existing word. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember why I took it. Just making my own cocktails of
Maybe
fantasy.
Collage is almost like a cocktail.
Yeah.
All right.
Someone who mixes high and low culture and sees them as that they penetrate each other, and there's kind of a fluidity between, or maybe there's no such thing as high and low culture anymore. A lot of the time we think that in the art world that we do something different from popular culture, and because it's more self-reflexive. But I think TV programs can be quite intelligent and self-reflexive as well, and I just with a lot of like peer-generated content on the internet and things, terms are getting a lot more fluid.
Is there a topic that you would that maybe doesn't get enough talked about in your own work when people talk about your work? Or
maybe like I'm just really curious what people think about the kitsch in it, or what I think about like using this rose as a symbol, like painting a rose. Like I'm just curious. This isn't, I guess, a question for me, but maybe it is in a way. But it's more like, do people look at this rose and actually think it's beautiful, but they're not allowing themselves to think that? Like they kind of have this like pushback, and
like a guilty pleasure. Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think guilty pleasures are interesting because it all of a sudden they became a word for something that used to be low culture, and now it's like high culture people trying to somehow allowing themselves to actually enjoy trash space and trash culture.
So maybe that's my question to myself.
Yeah.
Is, am I indulging too much in my own guilty pleasures?
They're not guilty anymore. Maybe you're not guilty enough about your pleasures.
Maybe I'm not guilty enough. Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering if you see Goldsmiths Gallery as a junk space?
That's really interesting. I guess I don't see any of that building as a junk space in itself, but because because it is a really old building, and it's got some really kind of intimate spaces, and
No
that's
elevators.
Yeah, no elevators. Just old stairs and really nice kind of ornamentation, which you wouldn't see in junk space unless it was kind of like patched on very quickly. But in a way, I guess what you're doing by kind of making this old space into something new, by kind of like just layering the new on top of it, that's a little bit junk space. Well, yeah, kind of interesting, isn't it, that we're here on this greenway, which is like totally, well, it's being used as a walking path, but other than that, nothing. It's kind of a junk space, because underneath us is a sewer pipe.
Yeah, it's a sewer from the 1970s.
So they can't do anything with this space, so it's just extra space. It's kind of wasted junk space. And then cemetery to our right, kind of a different state of ecology, and you could maybe say
death and waste are maybe thought of in similar ways